So I have a first-time guest on Grill Country today, Heidi Briones, who is a former congressional candidate in Portland, Oregon, and whose campaign I donated to
Oh, thank you
back
so
in the
much.
back in the day. And Heidi was a kind of a Yang associated candidate. So I think that's kind of what we'll probably where we'll start the conversation today is to talk about like how we got involved in the whole Yang movement and what we think has happened or went wrong or what it got right and what if there's any future to that or whether things are going in another direction or whatever the thoughts are. So Heidi, how did you come to be endorsed for by Yang for Congress? How about we start there?
Yeah, wild story. I mean, I think we all sort of got into Yang in a similar fashion. I think it was, maybe a curiosity about UBI, and then hearing him speak about it somewhere, a podcast, and then going down a rabbit hole, and then, being like, I've got to help this guy. This is really exciting. And, becoming a volunteer. A lot of people sort of went down that train. So that's pretty similar to me. I was, you know, just academically interested in universal basic income as a concept. I didn't really see it as a political policy or not something to run for president on, certainly at that time, especially 2020, So I thought it was very interesting that was, this random man's angle, I guess, and I wanted to kind of know more about him. So went down that route and just listened to every single thing he was saying and just thought, well, he's actually, pretty intelligent. He's well versed. He's different. He's an outsider, which is appealing, especially at that period of time. So yeah, went down that train, became, a volunteer, and then, the whole story went on. But when he dropped out, there was still this energy, in the Yang movement, I felt, and people wanted it to continue. You didn't want to just have it drop like immediately. So that kind of energy was there, and people were encouraging me to run for office, and kind of half as a joke, kind of half serious. And I was like, well, screw it, why not? I mean, like, like how hard is it? So I just like looked online and figured out, oh man, it's not really that hard to like get your name on the ballot at least, and like, maybe I can figure this out. And yeah, just sort of went from there and decided to run on pretty similar platform to Yang against an incumbent, a very strong incumbent in Oregon. And, obviously I didn't make it, but it was an amazing ride. And I think did really well for, being a first time congressional candidate with like no experience in the middle of a pandemic. So it was quite fun. Yeah, it was a good ride.
Can I ask what was your level were you super political before you kind of got sucked into the whole Yang phenomenon or not?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been pretty political. I have a bachelor's in politics. I come from a political family. I mean, my aunt was a state senator for, almost 2 decades, I think, and my uncle's a political consultant. I was an activist in college. I started the ACLU group on campus. I was an anti-war activist on campus as well during the Iraq war, post 9/11 kind of stuff was going on. Yeah, so I've been pretty political and well versed. I did have times where I would, kind of check out. That was sort of, I guess, from I don't know, maybe 2016, to like 2018. I just kind of was doing my own thing. But then when the candidates started popping up, that kind of started getting me a little bit back interested again. But yeah, I've always been somewhat political. And I ran for office a few times, like in uh, seriously, like in elementary school, middle school, like high school.
Sure, sure.
Nothing came from that. But yeah, it's definitely something that I've been into. It wasn't like Yang got me into politics or anything like that.
So in my case, that's quite different for me.
Okay, yeah, tell me, please.
I had been definitely politically indifferent for
Mm,
quite some time before Yang caught my attention. I'm a Christian anarchist, so and well, I used to be a libertarian. I
mm-hmm,
used to be a libertarian, but I was like a disengaged libertarian who basically thought
right.
that the system was irrevocably broken
Mm-hmm,
and that we weren't ever going to get an electoral result that made any difference.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, fair.
and I had been like
Yeah.
that. I had been like that since like the mid, well, I would say since the mid 2000s, maybe a little before that. And then I saw Yang, and I'm trying to remember where I saw him for the first time. I think it was on Joe Rogan's podcast, where I saw Andrew Yang for the first time, and uh, I was immediately like, this guy's different. This guy's
Yeah.
different. It's like, I'm. This is worth me. This is worth me not being absolutely faithful to my ideological principles over, because this represents significant enough proximal betterment as compared to everything else that's out there, that this is something that I want to put my energy behind. So for
Right.
me, it was like move. It was and I not only had I not been politically, I mean, I can't believe I donated to somebody's campaign. Like, that's like, I've never done that before. I never donated to a political campaign in my life. I donated to his campaign. My wife and I flew out to Iowa to be like on the ground volunteers, knocking doors throughout
Wow.
Iowa. We actually, there's like the little corner of the internet I'm involved in. There's actually connection there between me volunteering for the Yang campaign in Iowa, because the part of Iowa that we were sent to, it was the most Republican district in an already pretty conservative state.
Uh-huh.
It was like 85% Republican or something like that. But I had these really great conversations, and Gang actually did pretty well in the area that we were canvassing.
Makes
He
sense. Yeah.
actually, I think he actually was viable in
Yeah.
that little corner of Iowa
Yeah.
where we were working. And I kind of thought the campaign made a mistake by following traditional strategies too
Oh
much.
God, yeah. Oh, so
I
many
think there should
mistakes.
have been even. I think there should
Mistakes
have
were
been,
made. Yeah.
especially since Iowa has an open primary, there should have been even more focus on getting Republican voters to come out for Yang than there was.
Oh
And
yeah.
I
That
think the
yeah.
success that we had in the area that we canvassed demonstrates that because we basically just kind of, at some point, we just kind of ignored our lists and
Yeah.
just started hitting areas
Yeah.
that weren't
That's
on
how
it.
you have to do it. I mean, yeah.
So,
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, because the Republican Party of today is not what it once was, and they're much more populist, and open to outsiders and, willing to be like, buck the establishment, if they feel like it makes sense.
yep.
So they're not as partisan as the Democratic Party in its current state. So it actually makes a ton of sense that you would, find that kind of energy behind an outsider or something exciting. That's just like, he's definitely not a politician. Like I can tell you that from the jump.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
then
Right.
they'll start to
Exactly. Yeah.
listen. Okay, he's not
Yeah,
okay. Well, let's
exactly. And
then
like
I'll
the best
listen.
conversations I had,
Yeah,
were 100% with conservative Republicans.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Like the Bernie backers would slam the door in my face 100% of the time. They were
Oh
not open.
yeah.
They were not even open to listening. It's like there was no possibility of a conversation. It was
No,
just like,
because to them
I'm
he
for
was like right
Bernie,
wing.
slam the
Yeah. So
door.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's just like anybody that wasn't Bernie was right wing, like in
Pretty
that.
much. Yeah. Yeah.
And you're just
Exactly.
like, okay, gotcha, right. So
Yeah.
so when we
Exactly.
start with the right wing people, then like how about like
Yeah.
listen, like he's not a politician, he's not a socialist. We'll be like, let me explain. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
know, very
you
interesting.
could talk to regular people, and they
Hmm.
listen. So yeah, actually, yeah. So the reason it connects to the kind of the corner of the internet that I've become involved with, which is associated with Paul Vanderklay, who's like he's a Calvinist minister in
Okay.
Sacramento, California.
Okay.
And he's got a decent size, it's not huge, but he's got a decent sized YouTube channel. And there's kind of a
Okay.
community of people that are not super ideological, but come from a lot of different kind of backgrounds that are kind of like focused around this. And it's kind of like vaguely associated with Jordan Peterson, because that's how
Yeah.
he started out, was like commenting on Jordan Peterson's comment
Hmm.
on Jordan Peterson's content. But
Sure.
the area of Iowa that I was working for the Yang campaign is super Dutch Calvinist. Like
Okay.
that's just so.
Yeah. I mean, that's
And I'd
similar. I mean,
never
I went
heard.
to a high school
I
like
had
that.
no
Yeah.
idea what the Christian Reformed Church was before I went to
Mm,
Iowa. So
Okay.
when I came back, and it's like the YouTube algorithm is feeding me these suggestions from this Christian Reformed pastor who's talking about Jordan Peterson, I would have been, had I not gone to Iowa
So
and
weird.
met these Christian Reformed people who I had these
Yeah.
great conversations with, I would never have done that, because I'm kind of like I'm a universalist, so I'm not like
Oh yeah, you're on a
I'm a
different spectrum
so
from
I'm a
that. Yeah,
totally, yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
my
yeah.
Christianity is completely the
Yeah,
opposite,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, you're on the
Exactly.
opposite side of that spectrum. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm completely, yeah, when it comes to my Christianity, I'm on
Mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm.
completely opposite side in terms of my theology.
Yeah.
But I made these great relationships with these people, so that made me open to like at least checking out. So then so that's how I kind of became involved in the little corner of the internet that I'm in.
That's
So
really interesting.
there's an
Yeah.
indirect connection to my involvement with the Yang campaign.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with that. I went to an evangelical Christian high school that was mostly, Dutch Calvinist and, Reform. So yeah, it's interesting how all that comes together. And like, I think some of my high school friends, like a few of my high school friends have found me like, on Twitter, like, and like we like interact again, with people that I never talked to really that much in high school, but like we're, kind of finding now we have like things in common in this weird kind of political space. So
Yeah.
it all comes together. It's all this, yeah, it's all this
So
big
how
circle.
would you describe the political space that you're in now with
Yeah.
now that the Yang movement is over? I don't know. Do you think the Ford party is
I, I mean, I wish them well. I don't know what to say
no ill will, but yeah, okay.
because like, yeah, I wish them well. I know it sounds horrible, but I mean, I talked to Andrew actually, like, I mean, he gave me like a copy of his book before it was out, kind of thing, because I'm actually in it. So it was like, hey, you're in the book. Let me have you read it. What do you think? Please let me know what you think, kind of deal. And we talked for a little bit, short convo about it, and I was just like, yeah, Andrew, but like I just don't think it's viable. Like, I mean, I just don't think that like you can do it in the current political system. I just truly don't think that it's possible to like have a third party come on. He's like, yeah, yeah, but I'm doing it different. And I'm like, well, I know. And he's like, but like, it's about the, ranked choice voting first and open primaries first. I'm like, well and good. I still just don't think that like it's actually going to be a viable third party, but I wish you well. I mean, I'll support it to the degree I can. I mean, I can't give a ton of energy to it just because I feel like it's just not something I can get that excited about as like, voting reform is cool and I had it on my platform, but it's what I just couldn't be like my main thing that I was pushing for. But I appreciate what they're doing. But as far as like my political circle, it's quite weird. I mean, I'm very politically homeless at this point. I just not vibing with any of the
you and a lot of
parties.
other people?
It's not just the forward party that I think is not viable. It's kind of any of them. I mean, it's just sort of like we're just to this really weird point in American politics where we vote against things, we don't vote for things, and that's been going on for quite some time. I feel like, and now it's just becoming to the point of like being ludicrous, like to where most of my friends that are even slightly like libertarian cannot be a part of the Democratic Party anymore, like post COVID. So we're all just kind of voting like Republican down the line and just looking at each other like this is weird. Like we're all like lefties, but we can't
Right? Yeah.
we can't do
Okay.
this. Like, and I haven't fundamentally changed, that much in my view. Like I feel like the left that I grew up in and came to like, be a part of was like pretty libertarian, like in the 90s and kind of early 2000s. Like we were all like anti-war, we were all like do whatever you want, like gay rights, like women's rights, all this stuff was like cool. And then, it's just become so authoritarian, so establishment, so this mainstream media push, whatever they say, let's just go with that kind of a thing. And I'm just like, since when do we do we behave this way? Like, what are you talking about? So and the Republican Party is not like, my favorite or anything, but they just happen to be better on the most important issues that I believe are most important right now. And the side issues and the other things, I'm like, no, like I don't vibe with you guys there, but there's some major important things going on, that I think I have to side with whoever is not going to support lockdowns and masking kids and closing schools and forced vaccines and, war and like nuclear war. Like there's just like
Yeah, I
major
know.
things going on that I just can't vibe with.
Yeah.
So then I have to support the other guys, and that's just a weird spot to be in. To be ideologically not aligned with who you feel like you have to vote for. And I feel like that's where I'm at, and that's where a lot of people are at, especially if you're on the West Coast and you have any sort of libertarian, inklings about you.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the West Coast. It's like the Democratic Party on the West Coast. There's no, I mean, I don't even vote in local elections.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't, as a Christian anarchist, I don't think that voting is super important because I don't ultimately think that the political arena is the place where
Mm-hmm.
meaningful change necessarily is supposed to come from.
Right.
But I will vote occasionally if I think that there's some sort of proximal betterment that can come out of that vote.
Right.
But the local politics are so
Mm-hmm.
bad here. I live in Olympia, which is the capital of Washington State, and it's so progressive left that
Uh,
there's no,
I can
and it's not,
imagine.
and it's like the contemporary progressive left. It's not like
Right.
I mean, I'm an anarchist. I'm not on the right, right?
Yeah,
So
right. People, but if you're not with the Democrats, they think you're on the right now. It's very bizarre. And you're like, you
exactly.
realize that there's like a billion other like
So
points in the spectrum, right? That there's not just like with you or far right wing. Like that's not how this works. Yeah.
well, that seems to be the game. Is like both sides
Mm-hmm.
want to cast the other as some sort of existential threat.
Right.
Um,
Right.
which is I kind of think that's what I mean. Ultimately, that's what Yang is trying to speak to with his forward party. I agree with you that
Yeah.
it's not the
And
right
it
way to do it.
And he's also doing the same problem that you had in Iowa. I mean, he's also using very typical Democratic strategies to make this happen. And that is what I fundamentally disagreed with. And I did try to kind of, push him in that direction a bit, but it kind of fell on deaf ears, because he hired like all Democrats
Yep.
to run this whole thing and run it in a very democratic way. Like they're out there saying things like, we got to stop Trump and stuff. And I'm just like,
Is
oh.
doesn't it seem like the campaign got worse after he made that move?
Yeah, yeah, it's very bizarre because like okay, you're starting a third party and then you're going to be like anti-Trump, but the only people that are really going to vibe with that is the Democratic Party, and they don't like that you're starting a third party because then you're pulling votes from them and you're using the same messaging they're using, so then they're kind of like justified in being like, "Hey, you're pulling votes from us."
Mm-hmm.
Because like some people that would vote for us to stop Trumpism are now going to vote for Forward Party to stop Trumpism, and it's just like that kind of a messaging I think is not appealing, and it doesn't really work. So yeah, I think that you need to be different, like very very different, and take very firm stands on things if you're going to do something like a third party. So yeah, it's confusing to me.
So you've actually found your way though to voting Republican in this environment then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't really see another thing that I can do at this point because I just so fundamentally disagree with the direction and the positions that the Democratic Party is going for and how bad they've made things in Portland. I mean, for example, the governor's race. I mean, I can't vote for Tina Kotek. She was the representative of Northeast Portland where I live, and it's a hot mess. Like it's like horrible here. There's like tons of people living on the street and doing drugs everywhere, and just like all the time there's our neighbors that are like, oh, this weird person was in our yard and watch out for this and stuff. And like it's bad. Like crime is like horrible. And there's no reason it should be this way. So why would I vote for this woman who like supposedly, represented this district and was supposed to do something good? And then, oh yeah, please run the entire state this way. Like, hell no. And
Yeah.
I'm not super excited about Christine Drazan or anything. I mean, she's pretty establishment Republican. I think she's pretty moderate, actually. I don't think she's right wing like they're trying to paint her as, because that's all they have. It's like to say that she's MAGA and she's right wing and all this stuff. And I'm just like, it's not even true. She's like actually a very like kind of middle of the road, like typical
Yeah, but
Republican
any
in a
like if you
lefty
have an
area.
I mean
Yeah.
if you're in the Pacific Northwest and you have an R next to your name,
Oh, that's it. Yeah,
it's
it's
just
done.
like I mean, it's not gonna you're just automatically
Yeah.
Trump adjacent, just no matter how
Right.
liberal or Republican you
It's
are.
just weird though, yeah,
So
because like in the primary, she actually was running against like a Trump candidate. Like there actually was a MAGA candidate and she beat her. And then that now they just change that to her. Okay, well, you're like that. And I was just like, okay, but like 6 months ago, were you guys not there? You guys were, yeah, you don't pay attention. It's like our attention span and our, knowledge is just like it's shorter and shorter. It's like if it didn't happen in the last month, it doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So how long have you lived in Portland?
4 years now.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So so you don't really so you have no memory of what Portland was like before. Like
I mean,
so
I've been here
yeah.
many times. I mean, yeah, I had visited and I'd actually worked on a few political campaign type of things in the past. Nothing like with a candidate, just like referendums and different things. But yeah, and I also was going to go to law school here back in the day. I was going to go to Lewis and Clark. Thankfully, I didn't, but I was going to, live here a few times actually. So I had visited a lot, but it was definitely different to me. I remember it being much, much cleaner,
Mm-hmm.
much less, I mean, or less people, just less populated. And yeah, just a different vibe, very much more relaxed. Now it just seems very tense. There's this like anxious energy constantly in the Pacific Northwest that I don't really think I felt when I had visited before, but that's my
Well, and the
perception.
homelessness is really like because
Yeah.
I've lived in Olympia like off and on. I've moved away and come back, but dating back to the mid '90s,
Oh,
right?
okay. Wow.
And it used to be that if you ran into a homeless person in downtown Olympia, there was about a 75% chance that it wasn't really even a homeless person. It was just an Evergreen student who was panhandling
Ran out of money.
for
Yeah,
beer
yeah, like,
money,
yeah, yeah. Like,
right?
just mom and dad
That
didn't
was
send enough cash
there
this
was
month. Yeah,
there was
yeah.
actually we actually talked about Olympia homeless because it was almost all just Evergreen students who were trying to get extra money
Yeah,
for
Evergreen,
beer.
man. That's crazy. You're by Evergreen. So you're
Yeah,
aware of the whole Brett
I'm an
Weinstein,
Evergreen
like,
alumnus.
oh, really?
Yeah.
So you're aware of the whole Evergreen story then, I'm
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Okay. Do you have
Absolutely.
any like insight on that? Were you around or like
No,
with all
but you
that
can
or
see
no, you're just
Evergreen
kind
was
of
on
okay.
that trajectory,
Okay.
right? So
Okay.
I started at Evergreen in the fall of '89.
Okay.
So so that was kind of that was that was sort of in the middle of political correctness wave one,
Hmm.
right? So we went through political correctness in the late '80s and the early '90s, and then we kind of got over it.
Yeah.
And by the
Became
time you
kind of a
had by
joke. Yeah.
right, and
It's like, yeah.
by the time of yeah, exactly. And early internet culture, we kind of developed this culture of hey, let's just make fun of everything,
Right. And
and political
SNL was
correctness
so
went
a little
away.
bit funny back then,
Right,
and you could kind of
right.
joke about it, and then it
But it
became just
never went away
ludicrous.
at Evergreen.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Right.
It
Okay.
just
So
it
it
just
just kept on. It was a laboratory
like a little pocket of like,
where
let's
the
keep this.
virus was developed. I when I was at Evergreen, I did very weird on Evergreen things too. Like first of all, when I started off at Evergreen in the fall of '89, I was in I was in a believe it or not, Evergreen actually had a great books program at that time.
Okay.
And the reason they had a great books program is because one of the kind of original faculty of the school, Richard Alexander, was very not Evergreen. And
Okay.
people would actually ask him like all the time, like, why are you here? And so he would do crazy things like put together faculty to run a great books program at Evergreen, and he kind of like served as a counterbalance against some of Evergreen's own worst end strings. Basically,
Okay.
he the whole time
Yeah.
he was a presence that tried to save Evergreen from itself the entire time he was there.
Okay.
And
That's kind of interesting. Yeah.
the reason he did, by the way, is that Evergreen's Socratic pedagogical method and cross disciplinary emphasis is potentially amazing if you
Hmm.
can get rid of the singular ideological
Yeah.
influence. So
That's the
he
if.
thought he was
Yeah.
essentially
Yeah.
doing a public service by
Well,
remaining at Evergreen.
I mean, he probably was. I mean, I always have the theory that it's kind of nice to have like a Republican governor in like a very, blue state kind of a thing. It's just sort of like dad comes in and is like, hey, cut
Yeah,
this out.
yeah,
This is
yeah.
not what we're about.
But he actually told me to
Like
get
that kind
out.
of a
He
thing.
actually told me to get out.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay. He's like, no, this is going in a bad
he's
way. You
like
got it. Like,
he said you should, he just told me straight up you should transfer.
Wow. You're like,
when we
okay
were
then.
going over his evaluation of me, we kind of like we went outside and we were talking, and he he told me he should transfer. He was an interesting guy. The first line of his evaluation of me, he said Nathan sits. I went by Nathan at the time. I go by Nate these days. He
Okay.
said Nathan sits in seminar like an affable bear at a picnic table. Was the opening line of his evaluation.
So, okay, so did you
Uh,
guys have grades or just evaluations or
no,
both?
Evergreen does not do grades. Evergreen
Yeah,
is
well, yeah.
evaluations only.
Yeah, I went to Santa
So,
Cruz and we used to be like that. They switched to
oh,
grades like
my wife went
just
to UC
before
Santa
that.
Cruz. So we
Okay,
have
yeah.
a yeah, I have a gooey duck banana slug marriage.
Oh God, I love it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, very similar. I mean, like Santa Cruz
Yes.
could have gone down that way. I think that the main thing that stopped it was, yeah, going to grades was one of them. The way the campus is just set up was purposely set up that way so that, protests couldn't really happen because there's no real central point of campus, which is really interesting. They
Yeah, and it's
actually,
divided up into
yeah,
colleges too, in a
uh-huh.
way that
Divided into
Evergreen is not.
colleges. Yeah,
Yeah.
they do that to keep everybody kind of separate. And they also pushed engineering and like the really like, heavy sciences, like and getting people in that were like more focused on math and engineering than the liberal arts. They also did that. They did a few different ways to like stop it from becoming an evergreen, which, I mean, it's still a little bit like that, but it never would get that way because of, they purposely have been like sabotaging any type of, incubation like that there. But yeah, very interesting. That's such a crazy story. I mean, I watched like what's his name? You probably know the guy that did like the entire like there's like 50 videos he did or something like on
Oh,
YouTube
Benjamin
of the
Boyce.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
watched like all of his and just
Yeah.
like did a deep dive, but it's yeah, it's what happens when you just let this type of thing just run wild and there's no adults in the room like
Yeah.
at all,
No.
like
Yeah. He
yeah.
had I can remember Richard Alexander like actually making a comment one time in class about how if there was no intervention, then it would just be underwater basket weaving all the time. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, probably. I mean, yeah, it's crazy. Just the things that you see in those videos and the kids going wild and Brett getting kicked out. And it's just crazy. But
but
yeah.
I actually while I was at Evergreen, I ended up doing like individual contracts on patristics and all kinds of weird things. I actually did go away for a while, so I actually followed
Okay.
Richard's advice, and I transferred to Thomas Aquinas College, which is a
Okay.
small, very
Yeah.
conservative Catholic college in Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Very familiar. Yeah.
they have two campuses now, one in New England and one, but they was just the California campus at the time when I went. So I spent some time there, and then
Wow.
I kind of like some stuff was going on at home. I ended up moving back to Washington and finishing up at Evergreen. But my strategy for dealing with Evergreen was just to do like super on Evergreen individual contracts on things like patristic writings and the history of Negro League Baseball, which I was a little more evergreen, but
Mm-hmm.
um, things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really think that like there's, leftism really does include like the Christian anarchists, like to me,
yeah,
like at least in like, one little corner, because like you're not, I mean, it's not right wing, it's definitely libertarian, 'cause it's, it's anarchy. I
yeah,
wouldn't say it's really political necessarily, but it's just you would fit more in that kind of group normally.
yeah.
Because it's
Wendell Berry,
yeah.
who also endorsed Yang and is a Christian anarchist, is not on the
Mm-hmm.
right
Right, right,
by
right,
any
right. It's like,
definition.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, it's just like it's kind of questioning, the establishment. I mean, if you're an anarchist, you're just completely, not for that, and you want things to be more local. You do care about, generally what's right around you, and like as local as possible, and that's how, I mean, I think that's the best way to
Well,
frame a
most
society,
importantly, we
really.
don't think that
Yeah.
that seizing the state is a legitimate means of enacting socialism.
Oh
Right.
God. I
What an
mean,
anarchist wants to see is a restoration of the gift economy, and no one
mhm.
and if you're taking things away from people at the point of a gun, that's not a gift.
Oh God, no. I mean, I mean, yeah, I think that the best way is honestly, yeah, as local as you could possibly get it and less, less people
Exactly.
involved as absolutely possible. I mean, like the most ideal kind of setup for anything would be, yeah, this is like this little block that I live on. These are my
Yeah,
neighbors, or this
exactly.
little tiny circle with like, three
Yep.
or four houses and families, and we decide together like how we
But
want things to operate
that's where the most that's where we're the sickest though, because that's what we're the most disconnected from.
because that's what they want. It's like, yeah, I
Most of us
mean,
are
yeah.
more aware with what's going on in the national politics than we are what's going on in
I
our own
know. And
neighborhood.
that's why we have issues, because if you get hyper localized, you immediately can solve problems. Like, think about how easy it is to like immediately like clean your house or like clean up your yard, or and then you just start going a little bit out, like, oh, I can, let's just clean my neighbor's yard. Think of just some guy like mowing his lawn and he's just like, yeah, I'll just do my neighbor's lawn. It's literally right here. And then like you just solved like a major problem for that person,
And
you know? And
yeah, right. And what? Guess
like,
what? It's that is based on the economy of gift, which
right.
is what
Yeah.
Christian anarchism is ultimately based on, is the idea of the economy of
Love your
gift.
neighbor, right? It's like, I
Exactly.
mean, like, love your neighbor is the most basic concept, and it's not, like, it's not just for fun to be like, yeah, love your neighbor, that's
Yeah.
cute. No, it's like actually like a whole
No,
philosophy
you
that
do
like you
things
can
like,
like, yeah, right,
I'm mowing my lawn anyway. His lawn needs mowed. I'm going to do it not because I expect something in return, just
mm-hmm.
because
Yeah, and if
out of
everybody
pure
did
love.
that, then like what problems could you really have if everybody had the mindset of love your neighbor? That's really the point of it.
Right.
It's the mindset of do something good for somebody else, be a good person, and it's not just about your belief. That's also another thing that like bugs me about ideology, is like it's become so much about belief with no action, and it's just you're just a good person because you just believe things, and that's the,
Right. The right. Yeah. It's
yeah,
about believing the right ideas instead of
right.
actually like interacting with people on a personal level.
Right.
Yeah,
That's like the
exactly.
good, the works versus was it belief versus work?
Yeah.
You know what it is, but
Yeah.
it's like that. It's like I was always more in the works team kind of, because I'm like, but yeah, you can't just like believe like good stuff and then like you're just good, like, but you can, and then you just like repent. Like you could just go and like kill a bunch of people and be like, so sorry, all right, I'm all set, but then this person over here is like technically doesn't believe, in
Oh,
Christ or whatever else.
I'm totally on
It's,
team that I'm
yeah.
actually totally on team that works are important, as was James.
Right. Yeah,
So
exactly. So works are
so
incredibly
yeah,
important. I mean, because that's
absolutely.
what makes things better. I mean, is what you do. It's really, and that's the problem with the left, I
God
think, is
loves the
really just,
world, and
yeah.
so should you, is what it comes down to make to
Right.
just make it really simple.
Right. And it's just like be a freaking good person, and I don't really care, what you think and you believe. It's like that's like, we know like when your heart is good by what you do. It's just like obviously, you have a good heart if you're out there helping people around you, and we can see that. Yeah.
So, do you ever see yourself running as a Republican?
I don't think so. I highly doubt it. I could run as an independent. I mean,
Mhm.
I just fundamentally disagree with the Republican Party on, just, I mean, they're too authoritarian, too pro, cop, and too pro military, and too much of that stuff. And I'm also pro-choice. I mean, I think that's a minor issue to me. I actually am anti-abortion, but pro-choice. It's like a very
Yeah.
weird kind of minor issue to me. I don't think it should be political, but I still don't. I'm still not going to be out there like pro-life. I'm just not going to be doing that. So then there's just like, yeah, there's some fundamental disagreements that I'll always have with the Republican Party, and I just don't want to be like on another team or another kind of cult. I just see it as like a cult mentality. Like you got to go with the
Right.
team. If you don't go with the team, then you're not on the team. This whole like, and it's like, okay, I don't care about being on the team though. That's not like like this isn't like football. It's not
So
like a
your current
sport.
support for
Yeah,
Republican candidates is just like you find yourself in just a lesser evil kind of situation then?
definitely. It's really
Um,
just a like, like an FU kind of a thing to the Democratic establishment. It's really just like, just no, like you can't do this and get away with it and have us just still support you no matter what. Like that's just not like how this works. And it's a very, yeah, whatever. It's a very tentative kind of thing. Like, I don't really want to vote for this, but like, I just really want to vote against the other thing. And so that's where
yeah,
I'm at. Yeah.
yeah, no, I understand that. I mean,
Yeah.
I've said this before, and I mean, I'm not super ideological. It's just
Yeah.
my basic principles are Christian anarchist, but I do understand that sometimes in a fallen world, the only choices available to you are they're all evils.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. They're
So
not good choices. Like I'm not left with the
and
great.
as human beings, we have no choice but to act in the world. So sometimes
Yeah,
That's what.
sometimes, yeah, that's where we're left with. And that's what I feel like I need to do right now. But that can always change because to me, I'm more of like a pertinent issue voter. You know, if I'm voting, then I feel like there's a reason for me to vote. I certainly have not voted every single time I've had the opportunity. If I feel like there's not really anything going on, then I'm not really like inclined to vote. Like I'll might take a peek and be like, I don't really care whether we tax ourselves, I guess, one penny more or not. It's probably not even like I don't know if that's like or if we like change this one word here that doesn't really do much. Like there's certain things that I might not be super excited about, but when things are like pertinent and I feel like it's important and we need to do something, then I'll participate again. So I really just kind of go with where we're at, and think of, okay, do I need to do this right now? Is this worth my energy and my time? And if I feel like it is, then I'll make a decision to act. But that can change, and I think it should. I mean, I think if we don't change, our behavior based on what's going on around us, then that's, to me, that's insanity. You have to kind of like look at the situation, assess, and then decide what you're going to do.
I know you kind of joked about it in passing
Yeah.
earlier, but like the nuclear war issue, like to
Oh my
me,
God.
like that's like I mean I grew up in the 80s. Like I'm in my early 50s,
Yeah, the
and
Cold War.
yeah, like
Hmm.
so the Cold War was my childhood was the Cold War,
Right.
and very much the Cold War. And it was like sort of it was the outer edges of the Cold War, and certainly in my childhood there were signs that things,
Yeah,
Gorbachev came to
but it was
power. There were
still
signs
that
things,
vibe. Yeah,
but yeah,
you
right,
had like Rocky Four, you
yeah,
still have
right,
like the
yeah, Rocky
propaganda
Four,
going
yeah.
on, like against
Although
like,
although
yeah,
Rocky Four was sort of that upbeat sort of note of like maybe like had the optimism. So I
it
think
was. But
there
the
was
fact
like
that they even could
maybe
make that movie,
in
like,
the phase of the
and
Cold
like,
War, just to
yeah,
be fair about what I'm going to say, the phase of the Cold War that I grew up in was
mhm,
maybe a more optimistic phase of the Cold War. So
fair.
I never had, in my experience of the Cold War, I I never felt like there was actually a serious threat of nuclear war.
Mhm.
Like mutually assured destruction really did work in my experience of the Cold War growing up. But here's the thing: mutually assured destruction relies on one side in the conflict not being suicidal. And
Yeah,
it seems to me right now that the West is suicidal.
I think,
It's almost like we're determined to use the Russians in some kind of like large scale horrible game of suicide by cop.
yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, if you believe in like things being cyclical, which I kind of do, and Strauss-Howe generational theory, and about 80, every 80 years or so, there is a war, because, there's crisis for about 20 years. And then at the end of the crisis, there's some cataclysmic event, which is, typically been a war, in modern times. And then there's a boom of the economy and optimism and like, yeah, we got this kind of feeling. You have the baby boomers was the last time that happened. So if you believe in that, then it's almost like it's just kind of like we have to like we're just kind of at this point of like so much like tension and crisis, and like we need some kind of freaking thing to happen. And you could look at it from a conspiracy angle, or you could look at it from that's just how things cyclically work, that there's going to be some cataclysmic event, and that's happens to be the opening, and so that's where we're going to go, and then we're going to have this boom, and then it's going to clear out, and everybody's going to come back and be like optimistic again and try to rebuild. Then I mean, maybe that's just what's kind of going to happen. There's going to be something, and it's horrible. I don't want there to be nuclear war. I want there to be, whatever we can do, have another recession or something. I don't know, like some other cataclysmic event. But if you look at just the patterns in history, there's probably going to be a war again. I mean, there's just always like a major event. It keeps escalating and getting worse. And if this is the angle, I just feel like they've been prepping us for this like angle, like who that's alive right now doesn't have like some concept of like Russia bad. I mean, you were talking about it, in the 80s. Like, I mean, I feel like almost everybody that's alive right now has that like already ingrained in them. So if you like present that to them as like, hey, Russia bad, like you guys already get that right. And this is how, and then this is like, we got to do something. And everybody's kind of like, well, I guess, Russia bad. I can't really like argue with that. It's just, I think that we're just at that point where they're desperate for something to end this crisis. and something to boom the economy again, and the military industrial complex. So I feel like I don't want it to happen, but I feel like in another
I know
respect, it
progressives
might
don't want to
happen.
hear. I know progressives don't want to hear this, but at some level, I do think that the Russians claim that part of their motivation in this war is to prevent the civilizational virus that has caught fire in the West, that
Mm-hmm.
was gestated in labs like Evergreen.
Mm-hmm. It is. I mean, Putin just said that, right? He said that like the what did he say? Cancel culture is the cancellation of culture,
Yeah,
which I thought was very poignant. I thought that was actually a really intelligent
this is
way to put it.
this
Yeah.
right. This is why I'm concerned that
Mm-hmm.
mutually assured destruction doesn't work, because one side has a civilizational virus. So we have like bizarre things like suddenly antinatalism is like a view that a lot of people buy into. Like, so there's
Yeah,
this
we
like
really just
almost
don't want to
like
live. Yeah.
hostility to life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, very
exactly.
much so. I mean, that started like I remember being in college and like really smart, intelligent people I was in there with were like, "Oh no, I'm not having kids. I wouldn't put them through that. Like, there's not going to be like, fish in like 40 years, and like I can't have them be
Right.
in a world
Yes,
without
right.
fish."
Yeah, and it
And
feeds
I'm
in.
just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, but like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it feeds into like some of
yeah,
the extremism around climate
mhm,
crisis and
yeah,
like the antinatalism, and then you have like influential people. I'm not going to act like I don't believe that there's any kind of cabal. You don't need a cabal. All you need is aligned interests, right? But you have a
right.
lot of people who are influential in the world who are seriously talking about the need for population reduction.
Mhm.
We are more bought into a scarcity mentality than we ever have been,
Oh yeah,
right?
oh yeah.
This is what I liked about Andrew Yang, by the way, because I
Abundance
thought Andrew
mindset,
Yang,
and
more than
yeah,
any political figure in my lifetime, was fighting against the scarcity mentality.
absolutely.
At
He's
the
an
core of
abundance.
what he was
Yeah,
saying is there is enough. There is enough. Like that's like that is such,
yeah.
and to me that's such a like there's something fundamental, like that's such a fundamental difference into the mentality that I see dominating. Like that's why I backed him. That's the
Oh
core of
yeah.
why I backed Andrew Yang.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, he has hope. There's hope, the actual hope, not like hope he changed like Obama hope, but like he had actual like,
Right.
real hope, like not just the term, but like there is a group of very smart people. Andrew Yang's one of them. But there's a lot of others too that are very hopeful and that they believe in abundance and they believe that,
Yeah.
we can do these types of things and that they're kind of trying to fight this, angle, I think, in the West or in, just the global mindset. But I mean, yeah, I mean, you have like an excellent point there because I mean, it's going to this point of suicide. Sterilize yourself and your kids. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no such thing
Right.
as a man or a woman. There's
Yeah.
no like the we're destroying the earth, and it's like, and I mean, I'm not super Christian or anything, but I grew up that way, and I believe in a lot of the basic, fundamentals of the Bible. And if you believe that this is like for us, like this is all for us, like you're just gonna be like, oh, but I'm destroying this thing that's for me, then it is me, and it's
Right.
really just like
Yeah.
all
Right.
me. I mean,
Exactly. How?
like,
Right. No.
yeah,
Seriously. This is no. That's very important, Heidi. That's
yeah,
it. What is the meaning of the world if there's no human consciousness in it? It doesn't have
nothing.
one.
Nothing. Yeah, there's nothing, like, because there wasn't anything like before this, and there's no proof that
Yeah.
there's life anywhere else.
Right.
I like there's zero proof of that. So like to me, well, if there's no proof that there's life anywhere else, then I cannot say that there is. And so therefore, if we're the only ones that are conscious to this level, then this is for us. Like whether you are, religious or not, like it's just
Exactly.
common sense to be like, this is all for us. We can't destroy what's for us. We can only destroy ourselves.
Right.
We can only like kill ourselves from like, and then like that's it. But then whatever is for us will continue on. And and not everybody will destroy themselves because you still have people that live on islands and then don't pay attention to any of this stuff that'll still like be around. So you can't fully destroy human consciousness. I mean, the only thing you can do is like try to destroy yourselves, and
Right.
yeah,
So
so that's where we're at.
how do you
Yeah,
think this virus took hold of us? Like how do you think we
I think it's always there. I think that there's
mm,
this energy, right? If you believe in spiritual energy, I think there's always light and dark, right? There's always the like, even in your own heart, in your own head, you always have this fight kind of that's like, do the right thing, do the opposite. Why not? You just always have that like thought, in your head, like, I could save this person's life, I could not. I could just walk away and say screw you. Like, you have all these like choices, right? You have free will and you have
Mhm.
choice. And so you have to, if you have good things, to me, in my view, there's bad things somewhere else,
Yeah, it's
right?
ultimately,
And they're fighting, right? They're just
yeah,
like
it's a
this.
struggle between life and death and being and
Right.
non-being.
And so I think that when you have, like you mentioned, when we get more and more detached from our immediate local environment, and that's kind of the Jordan Peterson thing, right? Like, make your bed, like clean your room, those types of, that's like immediately local. But when you get more and more detached, when you have more and more like, let's focus on the national and then the global and then climate and the whole, the whole earth, and like, then you don't take that ownership of your own free will and your own kind of choices. Like, you are just like really just fighting this like bigger energy that could be good, could be bad. But if they tell you, oh, it's bad, no, it's bad that you're like driving a car around, or that you're like using like all this stuff you're doing is bad, then you start thinking, well, maybe I'm bad. I'm just
Right,
like fundamentally
right.
bad. So and you don't think that, like, well, you're both, like, you have the capacity to be either or. And if have somebody in your ear constantly telling you you're bad, sort of like that devil on your shoulder that became the media, politicians, like all this stuff, and you forgot that, oh, you over here though, you have like the angel, like, that you could listen to too, and that's your choice. So I think that the separation of like making things very national, like you mentioned before, making government and politics like a new religion, separating us from the church, the family, the very like local things that we started with, and making it instead the government. And like, what do they say? And what does the TV say?
Right.
What does the media say? What do all these things say that aren't local to me, that don't care about me? That fundamentally don't care about me, and don't listen to your family. Listen to this other thing over here. So I think that it's been, I mean, a campaign, and not necessarily nefarious, or like, not not a
No,
conspiracy or
right.
anything, but just like to make money. Like, honestly, like a lot of it is just like profit, because if you separate people from their local, where they can grow their own food, they can have everything they need technically,
Yeah,
then
reducing
they'll
people
buy
to their
things from you. Yeah,
desires.
yeah, exactly.
That's
Then they'll
really what
buy
it
things.
is.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, no, that's, I
because
mean,
our
it sells.
desires, our desires can be used to generate
Mhm.
profit.
Easily,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
sells immediately. I mean, sex sells, food sells, like all these like innate things that, like, you can manipulate, and we will buy it because we're like, that's immediately gives me pleasure. And all these
Mhm.
other things don't immediately give me pleasure. They're like long term, like hard work and taking care of your family and stuff. It's more like a reward. It's like a long-term rewarding feeling that, like, yes, ultimately it will make your life much better than just giving into all your desires. But what about like right now? And that's kind of where we're at, I think. And I get that, like, people fighting against that for many different reasons, which I might not have the exact same beliefs that they do, but I totally get it. I mean, society is better when you're focused more on the family and more locally, and
Mhm.
more on yourself and improving
Mhm.
yourself and getting better. That is important. And yeah, losing focus of that is always going to lead to bad results that I think we're seeing.
How do you think we start to heal?
We have to we have to get more local. We have to focus more on ourselves. We do have to listen to people that are philosophers like Jordan Peterson, and there's others too that are maybe less political or less polarizing. There's books that we can read, fundamental thoughts that we can have, I think, that like go back to the Stoics or go back to the Bible, or these thinkers, and really what fundamentally makes life good, like, how can I improve my life immediately. And so I guess the only way is to really just focus on yourself first, because there's, I mean, that's that, you can't tell other people to do that if you're not. So I think that that's one way, is to focus on your day to day. And
Mhm.
religion really, like, doesn't mean, people have made it mean lots of things, but religion actually means like habits. Like, what do you do every day? Like, what's your religion? So I think everybody needs like their own religion. Like, oh, I wake up at this time, then I do this, then I do this, I eat this food. And kind of getting back to the basics, and really like understanding your body and yourself, and loving your body, moving your body, giving it good food, giving it good nutrients, like giving it great knowledge, like reading things, like feeding it. Like, you need to start to like really go back to yourself. And then once you feel pretty strong and pretty like confident in yourself, then I think you go to the next person. Is it your spouse? Is it your friend? Is it your brother, sister? Like who's right next to you, or is it your neighbor? And then you start helping them. You start going there and seeing like, what do you need? Let me just do this for you. Let me help you with this. Let me just do it. I don't have to ask permission if it's something so basic. I'll just clean up your yard or something. Those types of things. And I think it's tough because how do you make people do all that? Like, but I think if you can get that kind of concept going, then it kind of resolves itself. And that's sort of why things become cyclical. So like maybe the ultimate crisis and like the war and all this stuff brings people back to that because you have no choice, right? You feel like, oh my gosh, the national is literally like blowing each other up. So like now you start getting more and more and more and you start focusing on just yourself. And then we have this optimism and this hope again. So is there something to be done, or does it just sort of cycle because that's the human experience and we're meant to learn these lessons? That I don't know, but I do know that focusing on yourself first is always a solution to like almost everything that's going on.
So get your own house in order first. Yeah.
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 I mean,
Yeah.
it's so simple, and it's, people can make fun of it, but really, truly, if you don't have, your stuff in order, that's the kind of the most basic thing. I think in every single religious text and every story of history, it's always been when people stop focusing on themselves and things just go crazy. And that's where we're at. We're just at that extreme end of it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I would agree with that entirely. And then the only thing I would add is I'd also say that I think dialogue is important.
Oh, yeah.
We really need to learn to start having real conversations, and to not think that, that our single perspective has all the right answers, and to compare our maps to other people's maps, and to listen to each other's stories. So that's why I had you on today, to have that kind of
No, it's
conversation.
important. I think so too.
So
Yeah, it's very important. And I think that that goes along with it. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think that for you to have a good conversation with somebody, you have to kind of have some kind of love of yourself and confidence in yourself and, some kind of something
right.
to,
Yeah,
right?
you need to be secure in yourself, because you have to
Yeah.
think that you cannot think that you are nothing more than the collection of the things that you think.
Right. Or you're
Right.
just a little speck like on some ball somewhere floating around
Right.
that's
Yeah.
meaningless,
Right.
and what you
Right.
think doesn't matter. Or the other way, think that you are completely right about everything,
Exactly.
either. So yeah, so
Precisely.
I think you have to spend a lot of time with yourself to really be somebody worth talking to. You have to have experiences, had thoughts, had a lot of time to meditate, read some things, really thought about things deeply. And then those are conversations that are great that you can have with somebody because you can tell that they've actually spend time with themselves. They actually have an understanding of, who they are, and they ask curious questions, or they're actually interesting people to talk to. And so I think, yeah, it goes right along. But yeah, dialogue is incredibly important. I mean, we can't problem with that is like with social media, and people will think like, oh, well, then I got to be like responding to every single thing somebody says to me. And that's like not the case. No, like you need to
No.
protect like your mind, and you don't have the time or
And that's
energy
not
to
dialogue either.
be
That's
doing
almost
it. Yeah,
always
exactly.
polemic. It's
Arguing
almost
and
always polemic, and polemic and dialogue are
mm-hmm.
very different creatures.
Very different. So I think it starts locally again because like you
Mm-hmm.
can't just go to social media is what people think when they think dialogue. They think I get that all the time because I've blocked tons of people on my social media and they're like, well, you're not for dialogue. And I'm like, but that's not dialogue. Like, it's
No, yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't have time for
Giving you
that,
the space to engage in your polemics against me is not dialogue.
yeah, like I don't have time for that. Like,
Yeah.
no. Like dialogue to me is like me and my neighbor, me and my wife, me and my family, and then I go out to friends. And then if I'm at a coffee shop and somebody's reading something interesting, we can start, a chatter and things like that, or these types of long form conversations. That's what, I love podcasts because they opened up long form conversations. I think that
Right.
in a way, that's the only thing keeping the internet honest is like long form content, So I love it. So I love that you're still doing this. It's great.
Well, I don't think I mean, you can't have a real conversation any other way, because the problem is
Mm-hmm.
if you compress the time that people have to have a conversation, you're going to encourage just two parallel polemics,
Yep,
right?
black and white thinking,
Yeah,
right? Just
and
like,
two
yeah.
parallel polemics is not a dialogue.
No, black and white thinking is the opposite. That's like the worst. That's like one of the main things you learn in philosophy, or if you start reading things, is like black and white thinking is to be avoided. Like
Right.
there's so much in between that you have to
Yeah.
consider.
Yeah.
And there's nuance, and like people now, if you're nuanced in politics, then you're like, oh my god, like you're nuanced. Like you can't have a nuanced belief. Like, are you yes or are you no? They want you to be like you're for or you're against, and a major problem. I mean, I think we're seeing it act out.
Yeah. Do you ever see yourself doing anything in politics in the future?
Yeah, I would like to. I think I would start like locally, as local as I would see fit. If I thought there was a problem that I can solve, and I really felt like I could do the job, and it was worth, worth pursuing, then I would do it. I like local also because a lot of it's nonpartisan. So that is nice. You can run like a nonpartisan kind of campaign in most places and run on local issues. So that's cool. But we'll see. Like it would have to be the right timing, the right position. I'd have to feel like I had a pretty good shot to win. So we'll see what happens.
What
Yeah.
advice would you give to Andrew Yang going forward?
Andrew, I don't know. Answer my text message. No, I'm just kidding. Um, not really. I would say, yeah, don't become Democrats light. Don't let people run your campaign that basically have an agenda that's too similar to what's already going on. I think that the only way to be different is to, go back to the roots. Like, why did you immediately start doing this, Andrew? Like, why did you run for office? Like, think back to that before people started being in your ear, and really like run things in that fashion and hire people that think that way, not just people that have political experience. So you think, okay, well, they have political experience, so then they can do this job. I think you need people on your team that have the same why as you more than the same experience as you, because you're an outsider still, you always will be, and you need to surround yourself with people that understand that mentality, and not just that have a particular experience.
Thank you, Heidi. I really
Yeah, of
appreciate you
course.
joining me today.
Thanks,
It
Nathaniel.
was
Thanks,
great.
Nate. Yeah, it's been great.
Take care.